Welcome to the OpenPilot Ground Control Station software overview. Today we'll take you through the different tabs within the Ground Control Station and their basic functions. So on our welcome screen here we have our project news, which is links to our forum site on different news and events. Over here we have links to our different websites, being our OpenPilot home site, the wiki site, the store, OpenPilot store, our forum pages, code reviews and progress tracker. Above it there's a series of buttons, the first one being this one here, which is our vehicle setup wizard. Now there is another tutorial that will walk you through the use of this wizard to assist you in setting up your vehicle for the first time. Over here we have a series of 6 buttons, being our flight data, our configuration, system, scopes, HITL and firmware. Now they link to the tabs down here. As you can see, they're mirrored. So if we click on the first tab, which is our flight data tab, it will open up and we can see that we've got 4 gadgets or plugins. First one being up the top here is our primary flight display. Those who may have played flight simulators before would be familiar with this view, where we have an artificial horizon, a compass, direction, angle of attack, our airspeed, altitude, climb and sink rate and GPS data. Now at this point majority of the primary flight display is not operational. That will come into operation during later releases of OpenPilot hardware and software releases. Next we have our model view, which is a 3D quadcopter model that you can move around and also will link to your board when connected. Next we have our system health gadget, which will show you any issues that is on your board. So when you plug in your board, that will pop up. So I'll plug that in now. Over here we have our map plugin, which in later releases again will show you where your quad is in the world as far as GPS data goes. Now you can see now that my board is plugged in and active, so it shows you the different components of the board and their status. Now the RC input will turn green once you have your board connected properly. Mine is just sitting here and has no RC input, hence why it's yellow at this point. So if you look at my board, you'll see that as I move the board, the primary flight display does follow it, and so does the model view. So it'll show you a graphical representation of moving. So moving on to our next page, which is our main configuration page. Now within this page there's a number of tabs that will allow you to make various configuration changes to your board, transmitter and a number of different things. So first one is our hardware configuration. Now at the moment you'll see that there's nothing showing there. So if I plug my board in, it will be recognized by the ground control station. And it will pop up and show you your board. So it'll show you the configuration of your board. It'll allow you to select what you have within the different ports, speeds for telemetry, GPS, all like that. Again, at this point most of GPS and all like that is not supported by the CC board. It is supported in a small way for fixed wing aircraft. It'll be more later on when later hardware is released. So moving on to our next tab is our vehicle tab. Now for those that have already done the setup wizard, you'll be familiar with the pictures here. This allows you to select what type of vehicle you have. It'll allow you to set your mixer rates, so the weight of each mixer, so for roll, pitch and yaw, so how much input that actually has. Your channels down the bottom here, so for your motor outputs to channel, so showing channel 1 to motor 1 to channel 1 and so on. Your throttle curve, it'll allow you to drag your throttle curve around to change it to have a flatter curve for hovering, or however you'd like to configure that. Next tab within the vehicle is your feed forward. Now I suggest for new flyers that you do not change anything here at this point. It will in some ways assist the flight of your vehicle, but please wait until you have some experience. Do some reading on the wiki page of how this all works before you play with it, because it will spin your motors when you do the tuning. So moving on to the next tab is our input tab. So our input tab is from our RC transmitter. So again, those who have done the setup tutorial would be familiar with the tutorial, the wizard for setting up your transmitter that you can run through. So that's all here for doing the setup of your transmitter. Shows you the modulation type over here and the channel. This is your throws, your centering that is set up through the wizard if you run the wizard, or you can do a manual calibration. The flight mode switch settings will allow you to set your different flight modes. Again, for those that have done the wizard, this is where it all links back to here. So it allows you to set up whether you have what stabilized modes you have and select, and you can then switch between those, and you can configure each stabilization mode down here. Our third tab within our input tabs is our arming settings. So at the moment you can see it's set to always disarmed. I always set to your right for arming, and there also is a timeout for how long it will stay active. So our next tab is our output tab. Now within our output page, it allows us to set a number of things, firstly being our update speed for our speed controllers, which is our turbo PWM. So again, for those that have done your tutorial, you would remember that. This is where you can do it within the ground control station to change your rates for your speed controllers. Next part down is where we set our neutral rate for our motors. At the moment mine's not plugged in, so normally you'd have a neutral rates up at some point around here somewhere, showing what the minimum or the neutral rate was when you set that through the wizard. You can test the outputs through here by moving these sliders up. Your motors will start to spin, so once you get to the minimum point, that's where you set your motors to. Okay, our next tab is our INS tab, which will allow us to do two different things. It'll be able to rotate the board virtually relative to your vehicle. So if you normally have a hexacopter which facing forward, if you change that to 45 degrees, it would then change the direction the quad would actually fly as far as going forward. Again, for new users, I suggest that you leave it where it is. Advanced users, if you wanted to change that. So also in here we have our level calibration. So where we did it within the wizard, this is where you can also do it within the ground control station main configuration. So if we click on level, obviously having your vehicle on a very flat and very level surface, it will calculate the level or the axle bias of your vehicle. Moving down to the next tab is our stabilization page. Now this page here has 3 tabs to it: your basic, your expert, your advanced, and expert. Basic and advanced are the same, except for the basic will just go up by 1 at a time in your settings. Advanced will allow you a lot finer control. So what this is, it allows you to set both your rate and your attitude stabilization coefficients, which is the settings that will determine how much your board controls the stability of your vehicle. Now there is a very good wiki page on this that will assist you in it. If you go to the OpenPilot wiki site, within the OpenPilot software user manual, ground control station user manual, after that you will then see stabilization panel. It will explain what each of the settings are and how they work. So in basic terms, as this is just an overview tutorial, what you want to do is to slowly increase these settings until you get your vehicle to start oscillating, which is just moving by itself in flight. Once you get to that point, back it off roughly 20%, so it stabilizes. You stop the oscillations, but the board is tuned enough where it will give you the best, the highest stabilization that is possible. So that's achievable for your rate, which is your inner loop, your attitude, which is your outer loop. Also you can change your stick angles. So within the full stick angle applies to your attitude stabilization. So by pushing the stick forward, the maximum with this setting at the moment that your vehicle would degrees it would move is 55 degrees. The next one down is your full stick rate, which is your rate mode. So by moving the stick to full, it would do 150 degrees per second, and then your maximum rate in attitude mode in degrees per second. So again, go to the wiki site, have a read of that. We will cover off on it in detail in further tutorials, as this is just an overview of the different pages. So next we go to our camera stabilization page, which will allow you to use your OpenPilot copter control board to control camera servos for stabilizing it as you would with a gyro. So if you'd like to know about this page, there is a write-up on it on the wiki. Please go in and have a look. Our next page is our TX PID. Now this again is a little bit for advanced users. So for new flyers, new people to OpenPilot, I would not recommend using this at this point. What it allows you to do is to use your transmitter to adjust your PID settings in flight. So again, if you're interested, go into the wiki site, have a read, and set it up. But again, for new flyers, until you're very comfortable with flying your vehicle, I suggest that you do not use this. Set all your PID settings on the ground, then try flying them to see how you go. Last tab on here is the auto tune. Now this, as it says here, is an experimental plugin for the ground control station. I suggest that new users do not use this at all, as your quad or your vehicle will shake a fair bit, will gyrate around. That is to program to set the PID settings through the programming of the ground control station. It is experimental at the moment. It does work. I have actually tried it, but it may give you some settings that for new people might be completely unflyable. So please, for advanced users only, you can try this. Otherwise, for new users, please stay away from that. So the next main window we have is our System tab. Now within our System tab, again this tab is aimed more at advanced users and developers for settings and debugging of your copter control flight boards. There is one setting in here that I will point out. So if you drop down the settings, you can see a number of different settings you can go to within the setup wizard, the vehicle setup wizard, and within this overview here I've spoken a couple of times about Axle BIOS. So if you come to settings, attitude settings, then Axle BIOS here, that will allow you to adjust how level your vehicle flies. So once you've done the basic level on the bench, if you find that it is drifting slightly forward or back, you can change that through the X setting. If it's going left or right, you can change that through your Y setting, or if it is yawing, you can change that through your Z setting. So please go into the wiki and have a read of this first before you play with it. As you increase the settings, it will make the either the pitch or the roll, whichever ones you're changing it, go one way or the other. So please go in, have a read, so that you know that you're comfortable with that. Once you select it, you need to send it to your board, and then also I like to you need to click save to save it as well. So that will adjust, as I said, the axial bias will adjust how level your vehicle flies. So X again is your pitch, forward and backwards, Y is your roll, left and right, and Z is your yaw. So moving on to our next page is our scopes. Now you'll see within the scope page here, they're actual scopes of your board with your axles, your attitudes, and your gyros. So as I move my board, you will see that the scopes actually move. So if you look at this scope here, you'll see as I move the pitch, the red line is going up and down, the blue and the green is moving slightly as well, only because of me keeping it at level. Now if I roll, you'll see predominantly the blue line is moving, and which is your green, which is shown up here. So this is used to help debug any issues you might have with flight, so you can see whether you have noise on your board through vibration or whatever. You may find that, you know, instead of a normal fairly flat trace, if you're just hovering or something like that, you may be getting oscillations. That'll help you pinpoint where those oscillations are coming from. So our next page is our HITL page. Now what this is, it allows you to run a flight simulator, being X-plane, through the ground control station and actually control it with the settings that you would have on your board. Now there has been a couple of plugins that some other guys have made within the open pilot community that will run on a couple of multi-rotor simulators. Again, the only one that is supported at the moment is X-plane through this, so it is a great debugging tool for developers and those that would like to experiment with different things without actually flying and the possibility of crashing or damaging your vehicle through strange settings. So our last tab is our firmware update tab. Now again, it shows you your primary flight display, your main board health gadget, and over here is our firmware update. Now those that have run the vehicle setup wizard would have gone through the firmware update. This is what this is here. So this is so you can do it through the ground control station. There's no real need to do that unless you're updating your ground control station, or so you need to match the firmware that's on your board with the ground control station. But again, if you're doing it through the vehicle wizard, that will also take care of it. So that's it for this overview. Again, it's just a quick overview of what's in the ground control station. We haven't gone into detail with a lot of the pages, mainly being the configuration page. We will do that in detail in further tutorials. So I hope you enjoyed this overview and it gives you some insight to what all the tabs are. So thank you very much and goodbye.